Every year when the Devils face Utah, our Know Your Enemy segment always hits a little different because we're not talking to an enemy. We're catching up with one of our own to go behind enemy lines. I'm Joe Healy. Of course, I'll have Brad Denny with me here. We're coming to you today thanks to the wonderful people at DeFalco's Deli at 2334 North Scottsdale Road. And a huge shout out to our guys at All AZ Sports for the hard work on these videos. So joining once again, as he does every year from 1280 The Zone in Salt Lake City, the state of Arizona's own and a graduate of Arizona State University, a proud Sun Devil grad, Patrick Kinahan. Patrick, how are you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm doing well. Yeah, how are you guys doing?
Doing great. Huge game on deck here for the Devils and the Utes. Now, talking about Utah, it's obviously been a very emotional and chaotic year for the Utah program, a concerning start in non-conference play, an early season QB change, the tragic death of Aaron Lowe, which came less than a year after Ty Jordan's passing, but on the field most recently, some uplifting play against the Trojans in the Coliseum. If you put it all together, what's the mental state like of this Utah program right here, right now?
Well, you have to divide it, I think, into two categories. Obviously, they've had the loss of not one, but two teammates. Unbelievable, right? Ty Jordan in Texas on Christmas night, and then Aaron Lowe after the Washington State game. We talked about earlier off the air about getting a day game. You know, most teams, they don't play day games, it seems. But one time Utah had a day game was a couple of weeks ago against Washington State, and then Aaron Lowe goes out to a house party that night, later on Saturday night. We haven't heard a lot of details on it. They've made an arrest of somebody who's got a rap sheet a mile long, and Aaron Lowe gets shot dead. On Monday, the team chartered a plane, took everybody, or at least everybody who wanted to go, which I believe was virtually everybody on the team, went down to the funeral, which is what they did in December. Same thing. Now, Aaron Lowe and Ty Jordan went to the same high school, and Aaron Lowe dedicated this season war number 22, which was Ty Jordan's number. I don't know if it's irony or what, but obviously it's a tragedy. So they're dealing with that. But on the football field, they made a quarterback change at the end of the second half of San Diego State, and Cam Rising is the quarterback now. And since he started this season, they're 2-0. They beat that Washington State game that I referred to. And then last week, they got the Trojans in the Coliseum. Pretty much everybody gets the Trojans in the Coliseum these days.
So obviously you mentioned the QB change, but what are some of the other factors that have caused this to be a different looking team from that 1-2 start in non-conference play to being 2-0 in the Pac-12 right now?
I think defensively it's about experience because 2 years ago, 2019, they went 8-1 in the conference, right? They won the division, tied for the best record all time. No team has gone 9-0 since they began Pac-12 play, up from 10 to 12 in 2011. So they had a really good team. 8 or 9 guys from that team, I think it was 9, are now in the NFL. On defense, I'm speaking about. Tyler Huntley and Zach Moss on offense also went. So last year, they had a bunch of brand new players, obviously, because so many of them went to the NFL. And last year, they only played 5 games, but it was so disjointed that they got a little bit of experience, but they didn't get any experience in playing in front of any fans. You know what ASU did, all the trouble that they had playing at LaBelle Edwards Stadium in Provo with the offsides and the atrocious amount of penalties. It was an embarrassment in that game. Well, the week before, it was Utah, and you can imagine the passion that we saw the crowd have for ASU. I don't want to say double that, but certainly increase the level of intensity when Utah plays. And for many of them, that was their first road game, really, because they played San Diego State in Carson in a soccer stadium 2 hours from the campus. There were hardly any fans there from San Diego State. I think Utah had more fans there from their LA kids. So the game that they played in Provo was the first time they'd ever been in that environment. So I think defensively, they need to get guys to get their feet wet a little bit more. Last year was just a sliver. So now they've got so many young guys who have experience now and understand more about what they're trying to do defensively. And then the quarterback change has made a significant difference. They find some what should I say? I was going to say solidarity, but more continuity, I think is the word I'm looking for, on the offensive line. Because when the season started, they had a couple of guys injured. They're shuffling guys in and out. Now they've got 5, 6 guys that they can count on an offensive line. So I think the combination of all those things, plus let's not overlook, they played Washington State without Delora, who's their starting quarterback for Washington State. Borgie's a great running back. He goes out early in that game. So the Utes catch a break. And then last week against USC, they're an absolute mess. So they really haven't been tested against the best in the conference. Now I think it'll start here with the Devils, and then they also have UCLA, Oregon State, and did I mention Oregon next month? They got the U of A, but everybody knows if you want a tougher game, playing Northern Arizona, not the University of Arizona.
So, talking about the quarterback position, obviously Charlie Brewer comes over from Baylor as a heralded transfer. Doesn't work out. Cam Rising comes in. What has he brought to this Utah offense since replacing him?
Couple of things that I think. Now, I've been covering this program for a good long while, and he comes over. He's a Southern California kid, and he goes to University of Texas. He doesn't play the first year, transfers right after the season. So he's in the program now. This is his third year, and he actually beat out a kid who transferred from South Carolina last year, but in their first game was against USC. 14 plays into it, he jams up his shoulder, and he's gone for the rest of the season. Can't participate in spring ball. Doesn't really get 100% until about last month. Went through training camp, was pretty good, but wasn't at 100%. He is now. So you got his health has been restored. Plus, he's got swag. He's got longer hair. He's got a mustache. Excuse me. He just looks like, hey, guys, I can lead you. I know what I'm doing. The players have bought in. I always thought he should have started earlier. I thought he should have started from day one because he just looks the part. And I probably had a little bias because Brewer I didn't know as much, where I'd interviewed Cam a bunch of times, spoke to the coaches about Cam, so I had a bias. But the bias turned out to be true because he has a lot more swag and a lot more confidence and a lot more leadership abilities. Plus, he's bought into the program. He's a Utah player. Brewer only came and was here for a few months, and then after 3 games, he's not starting, and he quits on the Monday right after. So he was never about the program. Cam Rising is.
So on that very topic, how did things go so wrong for Brewer? On the outside looking in, looks like he was going to be a perfect, plug and play type of guy with a bunch of experience coming from Baylor. Obviously went south in a hurry, and as you mentioned, he just totally quit the team. So how did that all come together?
Well, yeah, I think that Kyle Whittingham needed to get some more experience because he wasn't really sure if Cam Rising was going to be 100% healthy in September. So he basically needed an insurance policy. And Brewer's looking at Utah. All right, they just had a quarterback who left to go to the pros the year before, Huntley, who's with Baltimore. We know he was very good. And Rising was injured. So, and Bentley, the kid who transferred from South Carolina in time for last year, he transferred out. So there was a huge gap, and they needed somebody. So Brewer's looking at that and thinking, I can go there. Andy Ludwig was in the area of that part of the country. He's their offensive coordinator. He had a connection. So, and he's really good. He's an experienced guy, been doing it now for 30-some years. He and Kyle Whittingham go way back. And so you put all that together, he knew he had an excellent chance to start. But when he came here, I got to say, I was underwhelmed. I just didn't think – he's not very big. I didn't think he had a big arm. I didn't think he was that good. Now, I know he played well for Baylor, but then I'm wondering, well, my gosh, in the Big 12, do they even play defense? We saw last week with Texas and Oklahoma, right? Everybody's scoring. Oklahoma made Spencer Rattler look good for a time, and then the truth caught up to him. A Phoenix kid who didn't go and stay in the Phoenix area, so I may be a little biased there. I like my kids to stay home, but that's an issue that the Sun Devils have. They don't seem to be able to get the best talent to stay locally. We'll see what happens with Rattler. But the point is, it just seems like offensively, the stats in the Big 12 are inflated. It's like playing in the Pacific Coast League in minor league baseball when they used to have the PCL. They changed it around this last year. But you see these guys with enormous numbers, and pitchers would have ERAs of 5 and 6. There's a lot of high elevation, like here in Salt Lake. The ball would be flying out, and they'd be much better statistically in the majors than they were at AAA, which didn't make sense. So I wondered if it was a little inflated. But he didn't seem to have it. I watched him play in those games. Weber State, you can't really judge that. But obviously BYU and then San Jose State, He looked overmatched. And it was like, it's about time they made the change. It was obvious they needed to make that change. And Cam Rising in the second half against San Jose State led that team to almost winning in overtime. They lost. I don't know. You guys probably know. In the third overtime now, college, they make you start and go for a 2-point conversion, not after the touchdown. You start at like the 2 or 3 yard line in the third overtime, and you have to go for 2. And San Jose State got theirs, and Utah didn't, so they end up losing that game. But Rising, I think, at least now, what he's shown is the real deal.
And Utah always seems to have a reliable running back or two, or in this case, maybe perhaps three. Bernard, Pledger, and Thomas coming off a big game against USC. How do the Utes like to rotate those guys or use those guys? Is it a by committee approach, or is there some strategy behind the usage of those three backs?
It's sort of a little bit crazy because if you follow Utah football, which I know you guys have, Kyle Whittingham's about two things: run the ball well, stop the run. He's basically a younger, about a 6-7 year younger version of what Herm Edwards is all about. And Kyle is a clone of his father, Freddie Whittingham, who coached in the NFL, played in the NFL, and was a defensive guy. So you could see where Herm and Kyle have the same similar philosophies about how to go about coaching and winning football. And so usually by this time of the year, they have an established running back. And if Ty Jordan hadn't had the tragedy, I mean, he was just awesome as a freshman last year. And I've seen Utah's put a number of kids in the NFL from running at the running back spot, and none of them were as good as Ty Jordan was last year in those 5 games. I think Utah would have been picked the favorite if Ty Jordan were still alive because he was that good. So they brought in Pledger is from Oklahoma as a transfer. A guy named Chris Curry from LSU is a transfer. Mekhi Bernard is a kid from the Long Beach area who's stuck in the program. This is his 3rd year in the program. And then they got a junior college kid named Thomas that you mentioned. He's had a circuitous route to get to Utah. Big kid, really big. He reminds me of a Balaj in terms of size. The old, what was his name? Kalen Balaj for ASU 2 years back. Really big kid. But he fumbled the ball the first 2 games. Kyle Whittingham, just you would almost be better flunking all your classes than to fumble the ball. He just absolutely hates that. And so they wanted to give him a chance, but he fumbled it. And Bernard looked good. Then against Washington State, Pledger looked good. And then last week, Thomas didn't have any fumbles, and he looked the best. So my guess is, not my guess, I pretty much know that they want Thomas. Thomas is the most likely to be the featured back. Doesn't mean the other 2 won't play. But as long as he stays away from the fumbles, he's a really big kid, can run hard, exactly the kind of back that Kyle Whittingham likes. So my guess is that unless he fumbles, we'll see a pretty good dose of Thomas on Saturday night.
And of course, as you mentioned, Utah is synonymous with the run game. Although so far this season, they've thrown more passes than run attempts, which is pretty unusual. Is that a trend that you think will continue against ASU, especially considering the aerial success they had last week against USC?
Yeah, it's just interesting to see how they're going to approach that because Kyle, he'll tell you, when you throw the ball, 3 things can happen and 2 of them are bad. We've all heard that phrase over the years, right? So if they can run the ball with success, that's what he'll do because then he dictates or his team dictates everything. It's exactly like Herm Edwards, really, that's what they want first. And I heard Herm this week talking about, don't give up on the run, even if they don't have a lot of success right off the bat. And I know the Devils are something like, 11-1 when they run for over 200 yards. Utah has a similar pattern. But Rising got some mojo, and they got some really good tight ends. Their receivers, a little bit of hit and miss. Theo Howard, kid from UCLA a couple years back. Solomon Enos, a local kid from the Phoenix area. But they got 3 good tight ends. Brant Keithy is extremely versatile, can do a lot of different things. And then they got a kid named Kincaid and then Fotheringham. All 3 of those guys are good, especially Keithy. Keithy rushed for a touchdown last week against the Trojans. They put him in the backfield, and so he can do a lot of different things. So the Devils are going to have to be on guard for the pass attack. And I know McKee had some great stats last Friday night against the Sun Devils passing, and then I'm not sure what Fields and Lucas, what their status is. And I know Herm said he's hopeful, But then I understand that they didn't practice early in the week, so I don't know what their status is. You guys may know better than me. So I would think that they'll try to run, but they wouldn't have any problem leaning on the pass because they believe they can be successful that way too.
You just talked about those tight ends. ASU has had huge problems with tight ends this year. In back-to-back weeks, UCLA and Stanford had a tight end go for well over 100 receiving yards. So what does ASU have to do to slow down that trio of tight ends for the Utes this week?
Yeah, man, that Stanford kid, gosh, he looked like the best tight end I've seen in the history of tight ends with all the catches he was making. It was incredible. He was really, really good. They really, Keith, I think is number 80. They really got to keep an eye on him. And you've got to make sure that you got the right amount of people. I don't know if the double linebackers can stay with him because he's pretty quick. Maybe they can. Who's that Gentry kid? He looks so lean right now. I think he's just a freshman. Maybe he can do it. But sure, they've got to make sure that he's covered. And then obviously the best defense against any form of pass is an extra pass rush. And so they had some. I was impressed with the Devils, the pressure that they got on Stanford and their quarterback last week. And then, obviously, man, find a way to get a couple of turnovers. They got a couple of turnovers. They had that one that, who was it, Jones with the pick to Pierce, and he scored on that thing. They can do that. If they can get a couple of picks and get some short fields, that can help. But from the Devil perspective, I know they got a lot of guys to basically return everybody, but right now, Utah, that was the best offensive performance they've had in a good while. So their confidence level is really high. They feel like, okay, they stumbled in the non-conference. Interestingly, since they've been in the conference, they'd only lost one non-conference game ever since 2011. That was the first year to Utah State when they went up to Logan. Since then, they've gone 3-0 every single year until this year. But they make the quarterback change, so they feel like they're a completely new team. And confidence-wise is where it's at. Even if it's false confidence, they don't know it's false confidence. They believe it's legitimate. So it's real important to get in Rising's face to see what he can do because he hasn't been pressured that much so far.
It seems like every year Utah's defense always has big, nasty dudes, especially on that line. So far this year, what stands out most about this Ute defense?
Well, one thing in particular, number 0, Devin Lloyd. If they had, excuse me, they had a linebacker definition and a pitcher and a physique, it would be Devin Lloyd. He loves when the weather was warmer, he loved to give interviews with his shirt off. And if I had a physique like his, I would have asked him questions, shirt off, because he just screams linebacker. And I think he's going to be a high draft choice, potentially even a first rounder. He's all over the field. Whatever you need a linebacker to do, he can do. And forget about last year, but before that, in 18 and 19, the Utes have sent 4 linebackers into the NFL. And I think he's better than all of them, any of them. He's just that good. So that's the number 1 guy. And then they've got another dude, number 1, I think his name is. His name's Nephi Sewell. Now, you may recognize that name. His brother is a linebacker at Oregon, Noah, and his other brother was at Oregon and played offensive line. He sat out last year, but he went the first day, a top 10 pick to the Detroit Lions. So obviously it's a big-time football program. They're from the Samoan Islands, but then they moved to Utah to play their high school ball. Those 2 are really good. They got a kid in the defensive backfield named Clark Phillips III. I call him CP3. Nobody really gets it around here, but I think it's clever. It entertains me. And he was an Ohio State commit right up until the end from Southern California. He flipped. He flipped because Utah, if you're a multi-year starter at cornerback, you're an NFL guy. I mean, as I said 2 years ago, they go a lot with the nickel package with 5 DBs. All 5 of them made NFL rosters. All 5 of them are in the second year in the NFL. So talk about what they do defensively. If you're a multi-year starter, either at safety, nickel, or corner at Utah, you're almost guaranteed to be in the NFL. And Clark Phillips is a really good player. He's not that tall. He's only about 5'10", 5'11", but he's an excellent cover guy. So it would be interesting to see because the Devils really, as far as I know, haven't established themselves or a singular receiver hasn't established himself. I know like this Badger kid, they got so high on Wilson, but I don't care if you're 6'7". I'd rather have you be 5'7", catch the ball. 6'7" and dropping the ball doesn't really do a whole lot for me. So I'm interested to see what they do with Phillips and who they put him up against because he spent a lot of time, especially in the second half, on Drake London for USC for 15. He's an awesome stud of a receiver. So, and then they've got the usual cast of characters up front. They got two freshmen, a kid named Fillinger, who's a local kid, and a kid named Carlton and Fillinger. Both these kids are local, played high school ball here in the Salt Lake area. Fillinger was a Texas commit, and then they changed defensive coaches, and he decided, well, why do I need to go all the way to Texas? Utah has everything that I need. And so he's starting as a freshman this year. He was on the team last year, but obviously that year didn't count. So technically he's a first year. He's not a redshirt freshman. He's really good. And they got a couple of guys, Hutu Tau, a bunch of Polynesians up front. It seems like it's a never-ending cycle of these guys. Like, well, where did this guy come from? Where did this guy come from? Because Utah doesn't really get a lot of buzz in recruiting. It's not like, Rubenville's son when they go to recruiting on ESPN. Utah has 8 or 9 5-star guys. They don't ever seem to have that, but yet they put a slew of guys in the NFL, particularly off the defense. And so they've got, and Mika Tafua is another guy on the outside, 42. So they've got enough talent up front for.
Now I'm going to put you in the shoes of offensive coordinator Zach Hill. What kind of game plan would you draw up to attack that Utah defense?
Oh, man, I love the trick plays. Just go trick plays left and right. Plays, they're fun to watch. And as I watch Zach Hill, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like he's opening it up more and more. And I've been waiting for Daniels to come on the scene. He played up here as a freshman. What he did was like 3 for 20, and the whole idea was throw the ball away. I mean, I don't think he had any sacks. We didn't have any interceptions, and the reason why he didn't have any interceptions because 2/3 of the passes were in the fourth row. The students intercepted the pass. They weren't completing passes whatsoever. And I've been waiting. Last couple of games, I've seen that. So I think that for what they do, what the Devils do, I wouldn't really change. They got White, they got Tranum, and even the got is pretty good. But try to see if you can run the ball because I think that's your bread and butter. And if you can do that, then you can control the tempo, and then you can splice in the pass. So basically stay. I wouldn't change it dramatically unless they have to. And the good thing is I feel more encouraged about their pass attack than I have since Daniels has been there. And maybe that's not fair because he was a first-year freshman that first year, so you don't expect much. And last year you play a game and then you're off for 3 weeks. So what did you expect out of that? Probably not much. I think Devils only played 4 games. They were one of the few teams that played the least amount of games. Not like he could have made a ton of progress last year, and the receivers were all new. So you see a little continuity there. And then I love this Hodges kid at tight end. It seems like he's merging. So let's see what Utah's defense can do against that tight end. And he's a massive kid. So Zach Hill has a lot of options. And I'm interested to see. My guess is they do the same, and then Daniels can take off, although obviously he can't get injured because I think they're pretty thin behind him, literally.
And so you mentioned some of the key guys on offense and defense, but who's a guy or two that may be a little under the radar that might be an X factor for Utah in determining Saturday's outcome?
You want defense or offense?
Maybe a guy from each side.
Well, I know that they believe that Howard has some good capability. Now, he did play well at UCLA. Then he transferred to Oklahoma. And I don't know what happened over there. Wasn't paying as much of attention. I'm a Pac-10/12 guy. I will pay attention to the Big 12 here in a couple years when BYU goes, because obviously we need to be paying attention to both of the programs. And even Utah State in the Mountain West, we are a local sports programming on with our talk show, so we pay attention. I also got a kid that they talked about for a year or so, but hasn't done much until last Saturday. This kid named Money Parks as a receiver. And they believe he has some big play capability, but he hasn't gotten out on the field. And Utah doesn't throw the ball 30, 35 times. So you got to make sure that you're there when they're throwing the ball, because if you're off on the sideline, you're not going to get an opportunity. But they pumped him up, and he finally had an opportunity to show a little bit of his ability. Maybe he can continue that. They also got a kid named Jalen Dixon, small kid who's a speed burner, and they keep talking about, oh, he can take the top off the defense. Okay, he can, but when? He hasn't done it that much, but maybe they try to hit a couple of shots there. He's a kid that was in the program, transferred out, but really didn't get a whole lot, and then actually came back. And so, number 25, he's a speed burner. And then they've got a slew of defensive backs. That Vontae Davis, he's a kid. The great thing about Vontae Davis as a safety is he waited his time, and now's his time. Now, he was 2 years ago, he was literally behind five guys who all played in the NFL. What was cool about that team 2 years ago, this kid plays for the Rams now, Terrell Burgess, he wasn't a full-time starter until his senior year. So he waited, got his time, paid his dues, plays in 2019, plays so well that he's taken in the third round. Vontae Davis has had a similar story, hasn't been able to get out on the field that much, but now is his time. And so he doesn't have a ton of experience out on the field, but he has a ton of experience in the program. And they're really good at defensive back. So he has an opportunity, given his leadership and his experience in the program, I think, to make an impact on this game and going forward for the rest.
Are there any notable injuries on the Utah side of things that should be tracked or that could ultimately impact this game?
Had an offensive lineman, Kump, who got hurt in the USC game. But remember what I said, they found continuity with 5 or 6 guys, meaning that he starts. But they got a kid, they call him Bam. It's a nickname, Olawasini. He might be the biggest human being I've ever seen on a football field. He is just gigantic. And he is, if they were able to start 6 offensive linemen, he would be the 6th guy. So if Kump can't go, he'll slide in there, and he's been playing a lot anyway. So other than that, I'm trying to think, going through exactly who it is. They had some injuries in the preseason that affected it. A kid named R.J. Hubert, who was slated to be the starting safety, who had an injury, and he's out for the season. But I think they're okay, unless I'm missing somebody. I probably am, but I don't think that there's anybody. Certainly not like Lole, big stud defensive lineman for the Sun Devils. So would he have a tricep deal, and he's out for the season? It has, to that degree, none that I could think of at all.
So, last question for you here. If you're looking at this matchup from ASU's perspective, how important is this game for Herm Edwards, not only in terms of trying to stay on top of the South Division for 2021, but also for whatever the future may bring for this ASU football program?
Well, I know the coaches here at BYU and Utah very well. I'm old, and I've been here since '93. I got my start in journalism in the '80s at the Casa Grande Dispatch, of all places, coming out of ASU. And then obviously I made the switch. I actually was a broadcast major at ASU, and then worked at the Salt Lake Tribune here, and then got into sports radio, and I've been doing that for 20 years actually now. So I know a lot of the guys, and they tell me stuff about programs in the West, and the stuff they say about what's going on at ASU, in all honesty, is shady. And so what are they going to do there? I don't know what they're going to do there. But if they win big, maybe that can help. So if you go, I don't know, I've heard that this may be it. What is he, 68 years of age? They clean house. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Uh, I just don't know. I hear stuff, but I don't know obviously what's going to go down. But in terms of this year, what they're trying to accomplish, it's funny because Herm was just ripped and lambasted when he was hired. It was an awful hire. He didn't even know the Sun Devils nickname and blah, blah, blah. You guys I'm sure you've talked about that. Then the last couple of years, he's gotten all sorts of love. And correct me if I'm wrong, he was like 17-13 going into this season, and two of those wins were over Big Sky. So 15-13, and your big claim to fame is you beat Oregon, and then you play an NFL style, so all your games are close. So you keep telling me that you lost by one score or less or 7 points or less. Whoop-de-doo. That sounds good, but the style that you play dictates that you don't get blown out that much, nor do you blow out people. At least up until this year. I know they got UCLA pretty good, and Stanford, they looked great at the start offensively and then didn't score a touchdown in the second half. So the point I'm making is, they're 3-0. It's pretty good. One of those is Colorado. Colorado sucks. I don't know if you can say sucks on your podcast, but they do suck. So you should have beaten them. Stanford is okay. I think this kid McKee, quarterback's a young kid coming off an LDS mission. He's going to be better down the line. The UCLA win was extremely nice in the Rose Bowl, but you got to back it up, man. And if you can get this win Saturday, well, then you firmly are in the driver's seat. Doesn't mean that Utah or UCLA can't get you because you still have some tough games. Whereas if you lose Saturday, it takes a little bit of luster off. So in terms of this season, I think it's huge Saturday night. Give yourself some breathing room. And then also, too, down the line, maybe you get the benefit of the doubt if you go to the Rose Bowl, or maybe you just wait it out. And I've been told by coaches, the NCAA, if they come to you, just lie, because they're not an investigative branch. But I know there's been some people within the program who got all mad and basically turned state's evidence on the Sun Devils, so they've got some evidence there. So that'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, Patrick, as always, we appreciate you taking us behind enemy lines like only a true Sun Devil can do. So we will catch up with you next season when it's the Devils versus the Utes.